Mrs. Twit sat in her chair thinking up a really nasty, horrid plan to get rid of Mr. Twit. Then an idea popped into Mrs. Twit's head. She decided that she would make the carpet fly. So she went around the house looking for fans, hair dryers, and Mr. Twit's leaf blowers. Mrs. Twit went and hid all the blow dryers, fans, and leaf blowers behind the filthy, tatty furniture. Soon Mr. Twit stomped into the house with his long, thick, bushy beard. Right at that moment, Mrs. Twit turned on the fans, blow dryers, and leaf blowers. The carpet shot up, and Mr. Twit flew up, and with a cry of help, he zoomed out of the room. Mrs. Twit thought she had seen the last of her husband, and she ran around the room shouting out with glee. But no, that was not the last of Mr. Twit. Suddenly, there was a horrible shrieking noise coming from the garden. Mrs. Twit put on the brakes and raced out to the garden. When she saw what all the commotion was, she felt like screaming, but she didn't. Mrs. Twit started to act all kind, saying, "Oh, are you okay? Let me help you." It was probably just the wind that blew out the door. Later that night, Mr. Twit started to nail down the carpet. It made such a racket that Mrs. Twit had to get some toilet paper and shove it into her wax-filled ears to keep out the horrible noise. Mr. Twit was getting very tired at dinner, and he soon fell face first into it. That was not good, because Mrs. Twit had cooked soup for dinner. The soup splattered everywhere. Mrs. Twit grabbed Mr. Twit and dragged him up the long spiral of stairs and threw him onto the dusty bed. Later that night, Mrs. Twit snuck downstairs and unscrewed the nails that Mr. Twit had put in 4 hours earlier. In fact, she took every nail that Mr. Twit owned. They hid them in the kitchen, as that was the only place Mr. Twit didn't go, then rushed upstairs and dived into bed just as Mr. Twit woke up for a glass of water. In the morning, Mrs. and Mr. Twit had breakfast. After breakfast, Mr. Twit stood on the carpet, pacing around with a curious face and saying, "I don't know how the carpet flew out the window with me on it." Suddenly, Mrs. Twit turned on the fans, and then Mr. Twit flew up into the air and out the door. Mrs. Twit waited for about 10 minutes, and Mr. Twit didn't come back. So with a smile on her face, Mrs. Twit realized that that was the last of her horrible Mr. Twit.